reading from St. Mark's Gospel, selected verses from chapter 7 and beginning at verse 1. Now when the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus, they noticed that some of his disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they thoroughly wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. And they do not eat anything from the market unless they wash it. And there are also many other traditions that they observe, the washing of pots, cups, and bronze kettles. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked Jesus, "Why do your disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" He said to them, "Isaiah prophesied rightly about you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honours me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines.' You abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition." Then he called the crowd again and said to them, "Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile. For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, and folly. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person." Well, Ellie, a rather sort of naughty thought comes to my mind that Jesus had just been wandering around Courtney Place on a Friday night and rattles off this long list of sins. It's interesting though, isn't it, how so often we find in the Gospels the time where people have missed the point and focus on the wrong thing.
Yeah, that challenge that, in a sense, he's saying that you've cleaned all the outsides of the pots of the vessels, but the point is that the inside needs to be cleaned for them to be used, and your insides have not been have not had that process.
I wonder, before we sort of go into that inside stuff, if we just perhaps just note that what the Pharisees and the Jews are doing here actually was part of their culture and tradition, probably for very good reasons, very good health reasons. In fact, at the moment, our churches are full of little bottles of hand wash as we try to be very careful about swine flu. It could very easily, though, become a sort of rather nonsensical, wonderful ceremony around washing our hands and become part of the liturgy, couldn't it?
Well, it could, if we weren't careful about the way in which we passed on our traditions to the future generations. We could find in 50 years there was rigmarole about the sorts of gel that needed to be used and the significance of the particular essential oils that were
and probably somebody making a fortune because they would put the label church on it or something like that.
Yeah.
So what about this idea that nothing that is outside can defile? Is that Jesus also saying something about creation, about the world that we live in as being good? Perhaps. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting to think of. I think in a way it's sort of challenging us to think about the heart of how we live out our faith, and do our actions follow the desires that we've made in our hearts? So asking us to think about the first things first, to think about what we're believing first, rather than focusing on the external things.
I actually, I think there's something of the Ten Commandments here which focus both on God and on our neighbour, because this long list of fornication, theft, murder, and so on.
Yeah.
And I bet not too many people know what avarice or licentiousness means these days. They're not sort of words that you drop into everyday conversation. They really deal with how we deal with people, how we relate to people, aren't they?
Yeah.
And
which again is that sense of the kind of the rituals that they had could well, if we think of them in terms of the practices that we're doing at the moment of our hand sanitizer, is about caring for each other.
Caring for each other.
But what's happened here is that they've lost sight of the others that they're caring for, and it's become a show of their own ritual purity.
A thing in its own right.
Rather than being part of creation and the creation of the community.
I guess most people who worship God, most worshipping communities will have some way of recalling us back to the essential things of life. And of course, in our Anglican Church, we do that every time we meet for public worship, whether it's Eucharist or morning or evening prayers or whatever. We have some form of confession or other, which enables us to actually say, or to refocus.
Yeah. And we have lots of different versions of those prayers in our liturgy, and they often bring the two together, the things of the outside and the things of the inside.
Let's take a few moments and look at one of them. I know you've got one there. This is the prayer book. This is our New Zealand prayer book.
This is the New Zealand prayer book for our province, and this is the service of night prayer with the one then this time of refocusing back with God. It says, "We have wounded your love, O God, heal us. We stumble in the darkness. Light of the world, transfigure us. We forget that we are your home. Spirit of God, dwell in us." And then a final prayer goes on to say, "Eternal Spirit, living God, in whom we live and move and have our being, all that we are, have been and shall be is known to you, to the very secret of our hearts, and all that rises to trouble us. Living flame, burn into us. Cleansing wind, blow through us. Fountain of water, well up within us, that we may love and praise in deed and in truth."
There's something very wholesome about all that, isn't there? That really does bring us back to God, worship of God, worship and loving of our neighbour.
And the images are very pertinent to the readings of the cleansing, the image of the fountain of water welling up within us, and also forgetting that we're God's home. That idea of us being a sacred vessel,
sacred space, sacred place. Yeah. Why don't you just finish reading that last, the living flame? I like that idea of that, because we're being continually transformed. Perhaps we should close with that as a final thought for today.
Living flame, burn into us. Cleansing wind, blow through us. Fountain of water, well up within us, that we may love and praise in deed and in truth.
Amen.
Amen.